Why have you failed me, dice?
Fireball.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 20 of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast. I am your host, Dan, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Rob.
Hello.
We are going to talk about what we do every week, and that is Dungeons and Dragons and all things TTRPG. I always say all things TTRPG, but it's more like things that could be applied to all RPGs, generally speaking. At least those that are based on the roll of the dice. Though there are some who, Anyway, we have got your usual topics. That's monster and spell of the week. This week I have brought a monster. Rob has a spell. And then the final topic we're going to discuss is going to be metagaming, or essentially what is metagaming and our experiences with it. And before then, let's remind you, if you check out the description below, you will see all our social media handles, whatever you want to call them, usernames. So check them out. We're on Instagram, Twitter, obviously YouTube, and you can also listen to the podcast in an audio format on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Let's get rolling with the rolls to see who goes first, or who decides who goes first, as I have to explain every week. And I hope I continue my streak that I won. So you're using blue.
Purpley blue today.
I'm using reddy blue.
Oh, nice. Check that fancy focus out.
All right, you ready?
Ooh. Yeah.
Let us go. Boom.
Let's go.
Oh, well, I don't think so. Why have you failed me, dice?
What did you roll?
I rolled a 4.
Okay, well, I rolled 5 times that.
Oh, wow. Look
I
at
got
you.
20.
First natural 20, I think. I would congratulate you, but it was at the cost of my my death. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Congratulations. Per the rule, per the home brew rule we have, you have inspiration for this podcast.
Oh, I am deeply inspired, sir. Thank you. And for that reason, I will go first with my spell.
You will go first
Spell
for
of the
those
week.
who didn't hear that because he broke up.
Oh, apologies. Yes, I will go first with my spell of the week. My spell of the week is slow. Slow is a spell that I really like. It's 3rd level, which is a nice point for spells. Main casters, you get them at level 5, as most people will know. It's a good power creep, and it's the opposite of a very famous spell in many ways. It's the opposite of haste.
Mm.
It lasts a minute. It's a concentration spell, but it can affect up to 6 creatures of your choice within a 40-foot cube. So unlike haste, you just cast on one person, you can cast on multiple. They will have to succeed on a wisdom saving throw, which is, I think, probably the spell's biggest weakness, because I do sometimes feel that these kind of control spells can be a little bit disappointing if everything saves against them. But what will happen is they will receive a -2 penalty to their AC and dexterity saving throws. And whoever is slowed can't use reactions on its turn and can either use an action or a bonus action, but not both. Regardless of the creature's abilities or magic items, it can't make more than one melee or ranged attack during its turn. Now that severely neuters anything that you cast it on, and it also means that your companions, your teammates, your compadres will be hitting much more accurately. So if you've got a person with sharpshooter on your team or great weapon mastery and they're suffering -5 to hit, have the cleric bless them, you slow the baddies, you're getting rid of that negative and you're just steamrolling the baddies. What do you think of the spell, Dan?
I have never used it, if I'm honest. I have played a wizard, so wizards are obviously capable of using it alongside sorcerers and druids and some clerics.
And warlocks can get it with an invocation as well.
There you go. I've never used it. I have seen it in Baldur's Gate, but I've never actually had the opportunity. Or never, not that I had the opportunity. I've never chosen it over other spells. So my opinion is, it never reads quite as good as you want it to be. It's one of those where you want it to be like really good, and it's. I mean, it does have lots of good effects, like reducing an AC is great. If you're a wizard and you want to be throwing fireballs, your dex save minus is always going to be great. Same with the use of if you can get rid of reactions, because if you're casting spells, you don't want someone throwing counter spell at you. Yeah, they're good, but as you said, it is still a wisdom save, and I always feel wisdom is always one that a lot of classes a lot of people prioritize wisdom a little bit more than they do intelligence and stuff like that.
Charisma.
Yeah.
Charisma's quite polarizing.
Yeah, because unless you're going to be playing a face character, you're probably not too bothered about it. Whereas with wisdom, because wisdom's like a really.
There's a lot of creatures with wisdom as good to semi-good.
But yeah, I think with a lot of monsters, wisdom's quite high because wisdom is the stat used for perception. And so when something is more bestial, it usually has good perception because it has good senses. So things often tend to have higher perception, whereas their intelligence is thrown aside.
Yeah.
So it often feels like anything with a wisdom save is a bit like. But if I can take something with an intelligence save or a strength save or con saves are as because most people choose con either as a second or the third stat.
Yeah, a lot of creatures have got high con as well.
Creatures do specifically, yeah, but yeah.
I think one of the things, the perfect example, I remember this spell being cast in the Nuri campaign by Luke's Sorcerer. It was when we were in the town of Ashley. We were in the compound where the chained devil was, where the violin music was coming from, and we were against a lot of devils, and devils typically have magic resist, which meant that it was not really the greatest time to use it, and I think that's probably why some of these spells are less popular. Or just, I always feel like, well, I think it's quite common to feel like if I'm casting a damage spell that's a save, at least they're taking half the damage, and I don't feel like I've wasted my entire action. Whereas,
or not just action,
it's
a slot that you're losing, isn't it? It feels more.
Exactly. Yeah. Even more. Yeah. There's no worse than like wasting a spell slot. So I think sometimes these types of spells can be quite off-putting. However, I would definitely say, like, if you look at all those things, if you catch a couple of 2, 3, maybe 4 creatures in that, probably a couple of them are going to fail. Look for opportunities to use it, especially if you're a wizard and you're able to learn quite a few spells through scrolls and things like that. I think that's probably one of the better classes to have it.
It's alright to have in your back pocket if you know what you're going up against, or have an idea of what you're going up against. It's good to have in your back pocket. I would agree with that, yeah.
But it's just, it's one of those where I'm like,
middling.
Lightning bolt.
Like
Fireball.
it's got it's got a 40-foot cube. That's a decent size. Can't really turn your nose up at that. It's got 120-foot range, which is great because you want to have great long range on anything, especially if you're going to be chucking this in and then your bodies are going to be running in to hit stuff. But yeah, it's a bit of a.
I think one of the things that's actually really good about it is that it's up to 6 creatures that of your choice within that 40-foot cube. So even though it's a 40-foot cube, you're not going to catch your your players out with it. You know, your the other characters, they can be in that cube, and you just don't choose to have it affect them, obviously, unless you're that guy for some reason. Um, I do think there is sometimes a bit of a weird uh, disparity in D&D with control spells, because control can be very powerful against single target, like bosses. So they likely never work because there's so many legendary resistances. Like Strahd, for example, like wisdom's not even his highest stat, but he's going to have good wisdom saves anyway, and
And if
he's
he
got his
fails,
legendary
yeah.
resistances. Like when you're playing Strahd, you're not going to let something like this come through unless your players really wait. Like I know, Luke waited right until the end of the fight to try and get some stunning strikes off, because there was other spellcasters as well, and getting these kind of effects. So yeah, it's one of those, but I do still love it as a spell. I think it's great.
I was curious because I was thinking about it, and I'm just maybe just because I'm reading it whilst also having a conversation.
Yeah.
Right, so you alter the time around six creatures of your choice within a 30-foot range, right? In a 40-foot
Yeah.
cube. Any creature affected by this spell can make another Wisdom save at the end of their turns. On a
Yes.
successful save, the effect ends for it. If it remains within that 40 foot, surely then it has to make another Wisdom save again anyway, because it can still be affected by the time, right? The time slow. Yes, you're no longer actually affected, but you could be it could be reapplied if you don't move outside, because it's a concentration spell. It maintains
Yeah.
for the 40. So as long as you're in that cube, it's not how I would play it. I think I would just be like, oh,
No.
you've broken it, because a lot of time when these sort of things, either whether it's a feature of a monster, being that I'm more familiar with monsters right now, or it's an element of a spell, it says, it talks about you are immune to it essentially for the next 24 hours. And stuff like that pops up a lot.
I think it would probably specifically say that there was an ongoing area of effect, because then it would probably also affect other potential creatures that went into it, and you could maybe choose them. Maybe you could only have it on max of 6 at a
That's
time.
true.
I think it's one of those types of spells where you cast it, and whatever you successfully affect, you're concentrating on that effect.
Right. Yeah.
And if they're, I think it's that way personally.
Yeah.
I did also forget to mention one of the cooler parts of it, because I'm an idiot, is that if a creature attempts to cast a spell with a casting speed of 1 action, they have to roll a d20, and on an 11 or higher, the spell doesn't take effect until the creature's next turn, and the creature must use its action on that turn to complete the spell. If it can't, the spell is wasted. So
Yeah.
it's it's a very powerful spell in my opinion if you get it off. But I
It's one of those, if you're a wizard and you're fighting other wizards, it's great for you because not going to have particularly high wisdom, so a greater likelihood of failure for them on their initial save and succeeding saves, and yeah, having to take 2 turns to cast 1 spell. Not great. They're already going to be suffering with Dex, to never mind to have a -2 to it. AC is already not going to be great, never mind having a -2 to it. If you team up with someone who's taking, like, I don't know, Mage Slayer or something as a feat, you could be really effective with this spell. And it works, for example, like if you playing in our current campaign of Stormere, you are some sort of, you hunt down misusers of magic. Slow would be a good shout for you if you are teaming up with someone who is a mage slayer, or like the inquisitors that we talked about last week.
Yep. As soon as you said it, I was thinking about those guys. I don't think any of them had slow. I might be wrong.
I don't remember.
But they definitely have Mage Slayer vibes. I really loved those creatures. The only other thing I would suggest is, if you really want to get it against a specific target, get ready with Silvery Barbs.
Yeah, silver barbs. Yeah, yeah, you could do. But yeah, we'll unless you got anything else to add about slow, we'll move on from slow.
No, let's
No.
not slow down.
Hey, let's keep going. Let's keep rolling. We're not got anything else to roll. Move on to my monster of the week then, shall we?
Yes.
So my monster of the week this week is, I would consider it a favorite for those who know of it. I think that once you learn of it, you will probably want to use it at some point. And that monster is the large aberration, the Aboleth. The Aboleth is a big spooky squid, I guess you could call it, with a lot of sharp teeth and like a load of eyes. But it is more than that. It's actually a very intelligent creature.
It is.
That is also incredibly territorial from the sound of things, and for those who love lore, really hates the gods. They all hate the gods, and a big part of that is because pretty much when they die, they return to the plane of water where they respawn, and they have never forgotten the time that the gods basically sent them back to them into the water plane, the elemental plane of water.
Somewhat of a grudge, then, maybe.
They have lots of grudges against gods, mostly because they consider themselves to be gods. So it's that how they're very maniacal.
Fight them in water and they are godly.
Oh my, yeah, some of the stuff they do is really cool. But we may as well jump straight in. So as I said, these creatures are aberrations. These are basically aberrations is a weird category within Dungeons and Dragons. It's a bit vague, but it's basically anything that is kind of alien. Is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I've heard. I've seen other games, card games, various things refer to a lot of these sorts of creatures as horrors as well.
Yeah, like eldritch horrors type things. Yeah. It's basically what it is. They are like scary creatures of otherworldly natures. And there's lots of things that fit into the same thing. So you've got your beholders, your mind flayers, things like that. They all squeeze into that thing. So things with tentacles, basically. It tends to be how it falls.
Hentai monsters.
Hentai monsters. Although I imagine a lot of it's heavily inspired by Cthulhu, I would think.
Somewhat.
Yeah, so these creatures are primarily found in water. That is their terrain of choice, which is why they have a faster swim speed than they do I guess wobble, like what would you call it? Flap around on the ground like a fish.
They just have Magikarp speed. That's what they have.
Yeah.
It's like get them out of water and they're gonna just flop about and splash.
They can. Well, let's have a look. We'll try and go down the list and sort of thing. But I said great intelligence. Pretty much, they've got pluses in almost everything. Their strongest is strength, but that's largely because their melee attacks are strength based, I would think, and they're big, large creatures. But then they've also got very good intelligence and charisma as well, with +4s in both those. They've got some skills. They've got some saving throws. We don't need to go into specifics of those. They've got extended dark vision, which is always good. The 120 feet rather than the 60 foot. But you're probably going to need that if you're in the dark, at the bottom of a big dark lake or sea trench or wherever you want to stick one of these creatures. It's also telepathic, and it's telepathic nature. Just have a range. It's not one of those where it can just stay permanently linked to a creature. Though it does kind of do that. So, but it doesn't as a starting point doesn't do that. But big part of the Aboleth is its telepathy. It's part of its lore, part of its appeal. Because if the Aboleth does decide to communicate with you, it learns your greatest desire. It does that. No save against it. It just knows whatever it is you desire the most, which I think is really interesting because then you, as a DM, to then just go, "What is your greatest desire?" And the player goes, gold, or something like that. They just throw stuff out.
They didn't go full on like Lucifer in the TV show. That's how he always did his detective work. It's your greatest desire. Maybe not with quite the same charisma when it's a big tentacle monster.
Possibly not, no. It does have it has the usual amphibious feature that you'll find on a lot of largely aquatic, but can also go on land creatures. It also has mucus that is, not muscus, mucus cloud. So while underwater, the Aboleth is surrounded by transformative mucus. A creature that touches the Aboleth or that hits it with a melee attack while within 5 feet of it must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failure, it is diseased for 1d4 hour, and this disease basically basically switches your lungs to underwater mode, and it means you can only breathe underwater. Which I think is really funny because even if you defeat it, that's hilarious, right? It's so like, yeah, we've defeated the Aboleth. Go to get the water when you suddenly discovered you've got this disease. Like, oh, I can't breathe.
Guess we're taking a long rest underwater.
Yeah. I think that's really fun.
I love it.
It's got a tentacle attack and a tail attack. The tail attack is nothing particularly special. It's your typical sort of like a melee weapon attack with a bit of, does some bludgeoning damage. The tentacle attack has that with an additional on top of it. I'll read it basically, but if the target is a creature, it must succeed on a DC 14 Constitution saving throw or become diseased. We know the thing is full of disease. It is. It feels like it's a pet of Papa Nurgle, but it's full of disease from the mucus. No doubt is probably the idea. But you become diseased. The disease basically has no effect for a minute. And can be removed by magic that cures disease. After 1 minute, the diseased creature's skin becomes translucent and slimy. The creature can't regain hit points unless it is underwater, and the disease can be removed only by heal, which is a spell basically dumps a load of hit points into you, or by basically another disease curing spell of 6th level or higher, which I really quite like.
That's high.
Because that is high. When the creature is outside the body of water, it takes acid damage every 10 minutes, unless moisture is applied to the skin before 10 minutes have passed. Which, again, basically this thing, it loves to get inside your head and then slowly turn you into an aquatic creature that it can basically have under its domain, and as per its final little thing that's outside of its legendary actions, which we'll get to next, it can also enslave you. It can do this 3 times a day. But it targets one creature it can see within 30 feet, and the target must make a wisdom save or be magically charmed until the Aboleth dies, or until it is on a different plane of existence from the target, which is ridiculous. The charm target is under the Aboleth's control and can't take reactions, and the Aboleth and the target can communicate telepathically regardless of the distance. So this is where I was talking about it being telepathy over 120 feet. In the second stage of it is it goes to enslave you, and then it can communicate with you a very greater distance. Whenever the charmed creature takes damage, it can repeat the saving throw. And obviously on a success it ends. No more than once every 24 hours. The target can also repeat the saving throw when it is at least 1 mile away from the Aboleth. So that basically means you fail. You can do it again tomorrow, but only if you are more than 1 mile away. Now, if you even if you are half-witted, I guess, as a DM, the Aboleth is not going to let you get 1 mile away from it to make that save again. So it's a rough one. It's a rough one. Is enslave. Makes it very interesting. Legendary actions with regards to that, they're okay. They're basically they can do like a tail swipe. They can do what's called detect. Basically means it can do a perception check. and it can do something called Psychic Drain, which is when it's got a creature charmed, it can drain it. It can do damage to it in order to drain hit points and heal itself. So it's a bit like I think if the Succubus can do the same. I think they've got something charmed, they can do damage to it in order to drain it. If I recall, I did it. We had a fight not too long ago before Christmas, where I used Succubus. Yeah, we had a fight. No, we had a fight that involved a lot of succubi, and I tried to charm most of you, though difficult as it is. I did do it to a few. I did do it to eventually to our poor boy Joe. And if there's anybody who's going to get it, it was going to be Joe.
He's the one that stepped outside of Fitz's 30-foot aura of giving everybody else advantage.
He did, and he's also the one with the shitty rolls typically as well. And but he's also the guy who's probably not going to have charisma up there in any sort of way.
He will have bad wisdom as well, and not great charisma, I imagine. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. But to finish, I guess, in some capacity, I don't really want to go through them all, because going through all the intricate details of a monster is not really what I like to do when we talk about monsters. But I'll let you know, it does have some lair actions. So if you do fight it in its lair, or you want your players to fight it in the lair, you get some additional things that include basically using the spell Phantasmal Force. Some little changes to it. It also can control, basically create tentacles out of water. Basically, it can have pools of water that can just grab creatures, and it can do like damage just from creatures being in its lair, because it's full of rage because it hates the gods. There's also regional effects, which people go check them out. They're always cool. They're always good. These have got some definitely good ones as well.
Yeah, they're really cool.
It just adds to the whole spooky eldritch aspect of the Aboleth. And as I said before, their lore is pretty much that they once dominated a lot of life before the gods showed up in the Forgotten Realms, and then when actual gods turned up, not these pretenders, they kind of got screwed over a bit, and they've held a grudge ever since.
Understandable. There's a lot of things I like about Aboleths. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, and one day I hope to use an Aboleth. I've never got to.
Oh, you should. Or maybe let me use one on you, because I don't want to fight an Aboleth. Horrible. But they're also really cool. One thing, it's a little thing, but I do like it when Wizards of the Coast do have very good attention to detail. You've talked already about their memories and their ongoing grudges. They have a +12 to history checks. Like, that's fantastic. That just is so thematic. I love that. They only have history is an intelligence-based one, but they've got a +4, which means that they've definitely got expertise in history. So I'm all for that. I'm all for that thematicness. Love lair actions. I love regional effects. Now, I have fought against an Aboleth before. I will try and keep this story fairly short, because I know we want to get to our metagaming topic, but it was in Ross's campaign where I was playing Arthur, my Great Old One Warlock. We did also end up with some other packs, but at this point he was Great Old One and he was Infernal at this point, but still mostly Great Old One. We were in the Underdark. Surprise, surprise, that's where a lot of these things dwell. And we became aware of the regional effects. Some of the regional effects do have quite a range of them, being that a mild, the lair is slimy and wet and difficult terrain, water surfaces within a mile are supernaturally fouled. So a lot of these sort of things, and as I was going through it, at the time I was not as experienced as I am right now, but I got lucky. I said, oh, can I make some sort of roll to try and understand what's causing these effects? And a natural 20 is that bad boy. So he was like, well, you're a Great Old One Warlock. You've dealt with things like this before. You not maybe dealt with them combatively, but
yeah.
you've researched them. You know what the horrors in the far reaches of the cosmos are. You work for one of them. So he basically law dumped a lot of stuff about Aboleths into me, and instantly I fell in love. But I found out that they have a lot of lair actions that involve like pulling things into the water, and they have absolutely no movement hardly at all, 10 foot of movement out of the water, and they don't really have a great survival rate once they're out of their lair.
No.
So, being the great old one warlock I was, I cast telekinesis, and we found this is just something we'd noticed like on the way to where we were. We found a pit that was full of corpses. Not overly fresh, but still had some flesh on the bones because the area had other things in, as the Underdark tends to. It's fairly well populated. So I've pulled a few of these corpses out one at a time, and I started just making one kind of dance across the water's surface, and we eventually lured it out. And that's when the wizard was waiting with polymorph.
Oh.
We polymorphed it into a hedgehog. Of all things, I wasn't the wizard. I wasn't the one that decided what to do. He just panicked in the moment and just went hedgehog. Hedgehogs are slow. He had to pick it up with his bare hands then, so he took some piercing damage. I think the DM just adapted in the moment. But we basically sprinted for almost the full length of the polymorph spell.
Hmm.
And then we all backed off to a decent range because we all had ranged capabilities. I think I probably got about 80 feet away. Wizard's the same. And he let go of concentration on polymorph, and we just killboxed the shit out of it. Eldritch Blast, spells from the wizard, arrows from the ranger. Well, he was an arcane archer at that point, the fire subclass, but he changed to a ranger later because arcane archer's awful. So, needless to say, its probing telepathy as it died was just like, why are you doing this to me? It was great.
What did you roll to find out that it was an Aboleth? Like, even if like
Natural 20 is a history roll. Yeah, and like on top of that, Arthur had some very, very good investigative stats. He had an 18 intelligence. He had proficiency in a lot of those sort of stats because he was previously a college professor.
Oh yeah, makes sense.
So yeah, he
I think
knew his stuff.
to tell somebody that it's an Aboleth, give it all and basically give everything away before them, you'd have to roll something like a natural 20 and then have really good stats on top of that. That's like a beat a 25 DC type thing to get that sort of information.
I think it was just a case of, 20. I would have beaten a 25. I probably rolled close to a 30, if not surpassing a 30. And plus, I was just the right subclass of Warlock just to be the one that would know. So thematically it worked. He didn't literally show me the character sheet, but he was like, they're telepathic tentacle creatures. They're horrific. They're not very good out of water, but they can breathe. You don't want to fight them in water, and they will try and attract prey and like whip them into the water. So that was where I had the idea with the zombies. So yeah, it was a great. It was definitely a fun encounter, a memorable one. It was probably one where Ross felt he got screwed over a lot, but at the same time, we all found it hilarious and very memorable.
I'm sure. All right. Well, we'll move on from Aboleth.
Yeah.
Had a lot to cover in its stat block. That is why we did go through it in such great detail rather than discussing other elements of it. And obviously we got a good Rob story out of it that I'm sure now if any players watching, you're going to try and figure out a way to do that yourself and be the bane of your DM's life.
That's a good segue into the next section.
It is a good segue into the next section because the next section is, well, simply put, it's what is metagaming. I can give you what it says on Wikipedia if you want to know what it says on Wikipedia. But basically, metagaming often refers to having in-game character act on knowledge that the player has access to, but the character should not.
Yeah.
Is basically one of the lines you can pick out of it, and it's probably the most accurate one in the circumstance of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'd agree.
They're different. There is, if you read the article, there's different types of metagaming, but in the sense of an RPG, this is what we're talking about. Obviously, if you're looking at others like games, so competitive games, for example, it's having knowledge of. It'd be like looking at someone's screen when you're trying to
Yeah,
shoot
I
them and
mean,
stuff like that.
in competitive gaming scenes, whether it's Magic the Gathering, Overwatch, whatever, Hearthstone, the meaning of meta is literally, as far as I'm aware. I know it doesn't come from this because, as far as I'm aware, the word comes from Greek, but
It's Greek.
it was kind of changed to mean most effective tactic available. So like you'll commonly see in Magic tournaments, for example, Magic the Gathering tournaments, you'll see a big meta, and then you'll quite often see there'll be a few dark horses that'll run anti-meta decks which have realized what the common decks are, and they've made decks to counter that. And I think it still chimes a little bit with the D&D thing, because meta players quite often are ones that like to know a lot of knowledge when it comes to like rules and things like that. Monster stat blocks, so quite often they'll want to they'll be the DPS chasers, the people that want to rack up the most kills. So they
You
are
broke up
likely
again
to.
there.
Those kind of
So
players are likely to act. Oh,
you
when
said
did I
rack.
break up?
You said, I think you said rack up the most kills, but you went rack.
Yeah, yeah. They'll play like rack up the most kills, do the most damage. It's people that will play competitively and therefore are likely to want to use knowledge that is not something their character would have, but something they have researched, perhaps, or something like that, and take advantage of their knowledge rather than their character's knowledge.
There's obviously there's various terminology. You'll often hear me specifically talk about like above the table and below the table or stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's usually the terms that I use. So above the table is what you discuss as people in a room or people on Discord or however you play. And then obviously like the idea is that then it's on the table or below the table is the game that takes place, the fictional world. If we talk about it from a D&D perspective. By the way, it is Greek, derived from the term, but that basically mean or meta, which means beyond. But yeah, so in D&D is quite commonly associated with It's
two things, I think. It's if there's a role play that happened where your character was not present, but you as a player witnessed it on round the table or on Discord or on Zoom or Teams, whatever you've got, and then you use the knowledge that you've gained, even though your character wasn't present for it, in a later conversation to make decisions, to gain advantage of other people, whatever the case. I think that can either be malicious or accidental. I've seen, we had Stephen who would do it quite accidentally and very harmlessly. I've also had players use it, I won't say maliciously, I'd say it was part of their personality to do it, but it still had a very bad effect on the table and on the DM's confidence at the time, and it really kind of ruined the immersion. And the other one is much closer to what I already said with the stat blocks and knowing things, resistances.
Yeah, there's from our perspective as dungeon masters or experienced dungeon masters, there's a lot we can know before we go into it. Especially when it comes to things like we've talked about a little bit before. Rob knows a lot more about spells than I do. So if he knows what certain spells are going to be thrown, or he can see what sort of spells are coming in his way, he'll know how they work. Whereas a character might not. I have a little more. I guess my strong suit would probably be, because I DM a lot, would be more monsters. I know a lot of the monsters.
And because you only go through spells alphabetically as well.
That's also very true. Well, monsters apparently, because I chose Aboleth today, didn't I?
You
That
did.
wasn't why. I didn't even look through the list of monsters. I just
We
remembered
spoke about it recently.
talking about it recently, and I want to do it. But yeah, it's basically about having information that is in some circles would be called out of character information, and using it in character. There's actually the good. I just wrote it down on the Wikipedia page. The example that it does give is having a character bring a mirror to defeat Medusa when they are unaware her gaze can petrify them, or being more cautious when the game is run by a merciless game master. So the idea
I would
is
say that could even be a byproduct of a merciless game master.
sure. I think you don't want to be, especially you don't really want to be known as a merciless game master. Like you want to be, you want to be balanced. But yeah, if you know that's
You've used one
difficult
too many mix.
because like for example with myself, I'm known for loving to do twists and turns in my stories, so it is expected of my players. So I do hope that people don't go in just automatically acting like something's as a character is going to surprise them around every corner, because that is not of their knowledge. The character doesn't know that I control the world. The character just should just go about their way. But the Medusa one I think is a really good example of like we're gonna go fight we're gonna go meet Medusa. I should bring a mirror. Yeah. No, if your character doesn't know you then it doesn't matter what knowledge you have above the table. Obviously, metagaming can get construed in a lot of different ways. For example, there are people who will just take simply the knowledge of having the knowledge as metagaming. No, you can have the knowledge. That's fine. Like, if you really want to, and you're fighting a monster, and you look it up, what monster you fight, as long as you don't use that information, it's not metagaming. I would still not recommend doing it. You're tempting yourself, but
yeah, you are tempting yourself. You'll see some, but I think if that was the case, if just having the knowledge made you a metagamer, then a DM would never be able to be a player again because.
And players wouldn't play a lot, would they? Because especially early on, all the monsters are pretty much the same. And you start to get into a late game as well. Monsters start to be kind of, if you're playing a lot of late game stuff, the monsters are kind of samey as well.
Well, there are some things that are like famous anyway. Like we all know that poison's the shittest damage type. Fire is good, but still has a lot of things that resist it, and famously so, like devils.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to come against devils and you're a wizard with fireball and you're not a brand new player, you're like, oh, shit. It's one of the, and like I'll always refer back to that first session where I was Narakis and you put us against imps, and I was like, right, I'm just going to use a firebolt because I want to find out. I want my character to find this out now. Yes. Because he's an intelligent, because artificers are intelligence based, so he would learn from it. It would be in character. It was a good opportunity.
Yeah.
Rob already knew. Then Rob didn't have to worry about using meta knowledge, and that's kind of a good thing to, in a healthy way, sometimes look for areas for your character to learn the things that you already know, in a non-cheesy way, and just be like, oh, hang on a minute. You mean casting a lightning bolt at that flesh golem made it angrier? Oh, okay, I won't do that again. Yeah, it's great. It's just obviously try not to cause a TPK when you do it, because then nobody learns.
I think it's a weird one because I don't know if there are many people that argue. There's going to be billions of people on the planet, but there are probably some people out there go, oh, metagaming's fine. If you find a group of people that don't mind it, go for it. Yeah, whatever floats your boat. But for me, it does two things. Firstly, it upsets the balance of the game.
It does.
And secondly, it removes suspension of disbelief. Or it suspends disbelief. It suspends disbelief, right? So you have a certain, you do suspend your, no, it would be, so it removes suspension. So you suspend your disbelief in dragons and aboleths and beholders and stuff. But if you start introducing all these different aspects from above the table, out of character, you're starting to take yourself away from the game world. And it's at the end of the day, it's probably going to do more harm to you than it will to anybody else. It's only
Yeah,
just going to make it, I guess, less fun for you.
it really kind of it's such a weird like thing to have certain knowledge where you know your character doesn't. Um, Session Zero is definitely a place where you can talk about metagaming if you
Yeah,
feel that you are maybe a bit of a metagamer, and just kind of get what the vibe is like at the table. And if you're at a table of, I would say, people that played first edition, they're probably the kind of people that like that sort of thing. Stereotypically,
mm,
stereotypes don't always
no,
prove
no.
true. But like I think going back to, do you remember when we was it last episode or was it an episode before that? We were talking about making characters, and I was
Mm,
talking about if I was to play in Strahd, I would want a character that fit the campaign, but you don't. It's not really designed for the characters to know that they're going to Barovia,
yeah,
so it's kind of a weird thing. Like you want somebody that can fit that gothic horror theme, so you have to put maybe a bit of extra work into fitting them into
yeah.
that game setting.
You want something that is
Yeah,
thematically fits, but not that you're creating something where you know you're going to be fighting certain monsters, so you build your character around those monsters. You build it. You might want to play yeah, in Strahd we look at it. I tried to build kind of a thematic private investigator.
yeah,
Um, but I didn't build it around the idea of like, oh, I'm going to be fighting vampires or any of this stuff for meta knowledge that I had. I built him around what would be best for him to be a detective. Everything was around what makes a really good detective, as far as feats and stats and all this stuff go. That's what I did. Um, so it's about building around the theme, not around the knowledge of what is available in Barovia. Um, yeah, it's unfortunately I think it does happen, and I think DMs sometimes aren't are some. I think most of the time DMs are forgiving of it. I think sometimes maybe repetitive or repeat offenders become irritation unless there's a good reason for it. Um, Sometimes, like you mentioned Stephen before. He had a tendency to just get caught up in the whole game, and that was more of a
yeah.
compliment that he was so
Absolutely, yeah,
engaged in the game that he would forget that he wasn't actually present for that conversation because it was just he was involved in it, and
yeah.
that's fine. Like that's okay. He wasn't. There was no maliciousness around it.
And he was self-aware of it. So if he felt like he was, um, I think it went hand in hand with his excitement and sometimes getting a bit blurty. Like he
Mm,
would blurt a lot of things out, and because I would see Stephen when there was an intense scene going on. I remember one in Curse of Strahd where Felicity was having quite an intense conversation with Strahd actually,
mm.
and I can't remember if he was Goldie or Woody at the time, but I remember just seeing him being like, but he muted himself because he was taking the precaution, like because he was getting
Yes.
excited, he was enjoying the show, and he
Mm,
was he was likely to say something or get animated is a good
yeah.
way of saying it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a huge compliment in
Yeah.
many ways, and that isn't done in a negative way.
No. Because I said
Um,
it's being aware of your own weaknesses, I guess, is the way to look at it. Being aware that that any knowledge that you have can be harmful. And I think if you are I was thinking, if you are someone who has a lot of meta knowledge, it's quite a good reason to play a wizard, bro.
well, that was definitely a suggestion I was going to use. Fitz is a good example.
Mhm.
Um, I allow myself to be a little bit more meta knowledge wise if we're dealing with undead,
Mhm.
because he's kind of undead. He's got death as a patron.
Mhm.
It's part of something that he's made his profession, is dealing with ghosts, zombies,
Mhm.
undead things. If you put us up against things from the Feywild, I ain't got a fucking clue. Um, and
No.
that's something I deal with. I'm less inclined to assume things,
Mhm.
but as soon as we met Drez and you described him out, Fitz was like, oh, I know that's a lich. I do not want to deal with a lich. I'm not.
Mhm.
I want to go. And that's why I immediately was in a bad mood as him that day,
Yeah.
um, because he felt forced into that situation. But yes, if you
That was fun though.
feel you have I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I loved getting angry as him because it was a bit out of character, but in a good way.
Yeah, I
Um,
had to. I don't think for me there was you. In my experience, that had never been an emotion you'd had to portray as a character. And so
yeah,
I just had to check in to make sure that I hadn't annoyed Rob as well as
no,
Fitz. And as soon as
no,
we,
no,
we got the confirmation, it was good. We carry on as we were. But it's always good
no,
to
it was
check in
great.
with people in that circumstance.
Yeah, 100%. If you're someone that likes to have a lot of knowledge about monsters, and probably maybe you're a DM, and but you're now playing. First of all, have that conversation with your DM and just say, look, I'm likely to have a lot of information. Hopefully you've got a creative DM and doesn't mind changing things every now and again. You could make something quite fun out of that. Find out what the campaign is in session 0. Is it going to be a campaign where you're coming up against a lot of undead because you're playing Curse of Strahd? Or is your DM planning to use quite a lot of devils
Yeah,
because it's going to be an Avernus themed campaign, or any other area of the Hells or whatever? And then use that information to craft a character and say, right, maybe this character has some knowledge of devils. Not knowledge of every devil, but some. Um, what kind of character is going to have that information? Is it going to be a wizard? Is it going to be a fighter that's a mercenary that is a, a tiefling and has devils in his backstory and hates them? Or is that character a paladin with an oath of vengeance? Or
or a Warlock
go
of the
with
Fiend.
a Wall of the Fiends or a blood hunter that's
Yeah.
some sort of devil focused one.
Mhm.
Um, you don't really, the class itself is arbitrary. Pick
Yes,
whatever the hell you want to play.
it is.
The character is somebody who is going to have that knowledge. Um, Build it into their backstory. How did they gain that knowledge? Why have they got that knowledge? And when your dungeon master changes some of the stats of these creatures, lean into it. Roleplay shocked. If you're thinking these things should be immune to fire, but they're not, and they're suddenly immune to lightning or
Yeah.
ice,
Or
whatever.
the other way, you
Uh,
think they should be resistant and they're immune.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that did no damage. That should have done at least something. That's what the hell's going on. That's stronger
Mhm.
than that should be. And start investigating and start, really lean into it, and you will have such a good time. I
Mhm.
promise you, it will be great, and your DM will love bouncing off you on that. Um, it's it's a healthy way to bring your outside knowledge in,
Yeah. If you're,
as long as you don't take this.
there's also an alternative because obviously we brought it up. Play something that has a lot of knowledge. Whether as we talked about, wizards typically have a lot of knowledge because of their wizard. It's how they become wizards. It's what you are. And obviously,
Eh?
warlock fiends and all this sort of thing. But the opposite is kind of a little bit how I did Lud. So, and that is to go the complete opposite because I just went with a character that would know nothing. Ergo, there's no temptation for me because I can just go. Even if I had Dan that knows what we're fighting, it's just funny because Lud, I can just easily go. He doesn't know. Just does whatever.
Lud's
Um,
just going to jump into things and punch them anyway, and then as soon
yeah.
as he kills one thing, he's going to pick that thing up and he's going to beat other things with it.
That's pretty much his favorite thing right now.
Yeah, and and as a DM, it was great to see. And it wasn't like, and using my previous example of really like using information when Dan did this with Lud, I also loved that. is as a DM, it was great to see Dan playing Lud. So although it is the opposite of the example I gave of having knowledge and using that knowledge to build a good character, you went with absolutely almost negative knowledge. It didn't matter. You were still having lots of fun. You were still getting involved. You were still being animated and enthusiastic. And that's still great to see as a DM.
Mm.
I think so. The point I was saying is just find a way for you to have fun
Yeah.
and forget about meta knowledge.
Because the great thing for me, I think I'm also capable of separating myself from my character.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do struggle with what's the term that you always use? Self-inserts.
Yes.
So inserting themselves into their character, and I think for me, and it's this weird bias that I have, and I'll admit it, I don't like self-inserts.
Yeah.
I just don't. But they're not a bad thing. It's just it's not my preference. And sometimes, if someone wants to play a game and they're basically putting themselves in that game, it can be easier for them to immerse themselves in the game.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And to see themselves in that situation, to have the correct emotions at the correct time, maybe to get lost in the world. But that also comes with the consequence that you have. It makes it so much harder to forget that meta.
Yeah.
Because
And to
you're.
separate yourself emotionally as well, like
Mhm.
like you were saying, like when you wanted to just quickly check that I wasn't pissed off, that it was
Mm.
Fitz that was pissed off. Like Fitz isn't a self-insert.
No.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think every character I always will have a splinter of myself in
Sure.
them, but
Sure.
it will usually be a highly exaggerated part. I don't really know if I've ever even played a self-insert really. It's difficult to say.
I don't, because I don't my own psychological issues, right? So my own mental issues. It's that, I guess. Yeah, the idea. I don't want to be myself, so I would rather be something else.
Yeah,
Because I'm boring. Why the hell would I want to be me in that world? I want to be something, exciting and interesting, and
fantastical.
yeah, like I don't, and yeah, I just doesn't. That's not why I play those games. I love getting lost in a world. A good story, escapism. Yeah, I think that's pretty much me through and through. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of time with self inserts, people can it's far easier for people to allow that meta game knowledge to seep in, and it's even, I think, sometimes a little more difficult for your DM to recognize metagaming,
Yeah,
because the lines are so blurred. Um, that when for example, if there's different types of role players, right? We've talked about different types of role playing and stuff before, and the way that you interact at the table and how you play at the table. So, like, for example, Steph, that plays in our group, she very much likes to tell you or me what her character's thinking in that moment,
yeah,
and she likes to vocalize it, and that's fine. It's great, no problem with that. Um, but if you are self-insert, that line of, like, is that what you're thinking or is that what your character's thinking, suddenly becomes very blurred, and you don't
yeah,
know as a DM partly what you should be telling them, because are they asking a question that is for them, or is it asking a question for their character?
yeah,
Um,
100%.
and that.
It can become quite difficult in that respect. I think that's probably why actually now maybe this is a moment of self-reflection. When I look back at my character creation process,
Mm,
I do construct at the very start what drives them
mhm,
and what affects them negatively and positively, and I try to get a good grasp of that.
yeah,
And I think that's probably why I don't self-insert so much.
perhaps.
Like look at Narakis, I straight away when I know exactly what what his trauma is. I know exactly
Yeah.
what he's looking for in the world. Yeah, that's a good way to avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really have too much or anything else really to add about metagaming, if I'm honest. Like, we've covered the basics. Feel free, everybody everybody listening, to obviously check it out on. There's lots of resources out there for it. If you just simply want
Yes,
a
there
quick
is.
description, check on Wikipedia. Kind of avoid things like Reddit for these discussions, because you're going to get a load of nonsense. People thinking something is meta and it's not, or the vice versa. So yeah, just stick to something that's a little more reputable or scientific even. It's a weird thing to say scientific, but there is, I guess you can have a sociological aspect to it. But I guess with that, we'll call it an end to this week's podcast. It has been episode 20, the big 2-0 of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast. Please go check out our socials in the description below. We do post, or I typically try to post a couple of shorts on YouTube, just little clips, snippets from the podcast. This week there was only been one rather than the usual two that I do, and that's simply because there's been New Year's and my birthday, and I didn't want to spend
Happy
too much time.
birthday, Dan.
Thank you very much. I didn't want to spend too much time doing it. Check out our socials. Yep, said that. Please like this podcast and subscribe. Until next time, I've been Dan. This has been Rob, and I hope you are. Are you? And I hope all your dice roll 20s. See you next time.
I rolled that natural 20 on the 20th episode.